Labiotech was in the Danish capital recently to attend the Medicon Valley Alliance annual summit. The alliance has been around for 25 years, and Medicon Valley, which covers eastern Denmark and southern Sweden, has grown to become one of Europe's leading life science regions. It has 65,000 life science jobs, 9 universities and 9 life science parks. One of the presenters at the day-long event was Eva Hoffmann, and we went to visit her at the university after the event.
Yeah. I'm a professor in molecular genetics here at the University of Copenhagen, and we look at how our DNA changes as it's passed on to our children. This has implications obviously for children's health. It also has for reproductive health for mom and dad as well. So we work as part of a bigger consortium or grouping called ReproUnion, where we look at specific areas that has been challenging to get at, because reproductive health generally has been one where we generally thought that IVF would solve all problems. And it has solved many problems, but it's kind of stagnated, that only 1 in 3 treatments actually work. We also know that for women, it's the women being treated even though there might be a male reason, and 50% of the couples who turn up in clinic and need fertility treatment, it's a male factor. So we want to try and lessen the burden on women and also get better efficiency in terms of treatment, and also then ensure that we can maybe also design and come up with new interventions, both diagnostically but also prognostically and perhaps also treatment-wise for the patients who would really like to have a child.
And are there any promising studies in that area?
Yes, there are some very, very promising studies in the area. Very excitingly, we have strands going on both on the male side and also on the female side, as well as also in pregnancy losses as well, to try and find out if we can improve treatments. One of the most promising way of looking has been combining the metadata that we have of clinical registries here in Denmark, but also with more clinical data and also what we call biobanks. So ReproUnion has a biobank, the biobank in infertility cohort, Rubik as we call it, where we're collecting all sorts of material from about 5,000 infertile couples. And the first studies are now underway to try and see if we can, what we call, stratify patients. Meaning, rather than to say, well, it's infertility, we know there's many kinds of infertility now. And that means that with the large number that we have, by gaining and having a really great collaboration across both eastern Denmark and also southern Sweden, we can get to a critical mass and start kind of defining what are the causes of infertility for both the father but also the mother. We have, for example, found that when you look at women and women's eggs, we've known for quite a while that as women grow older in terms of reproduction, so we call this advanced maternal health, that eggs tend to decline in their quality, and that means that there are more chromosomes that are usually passed on then to their children, such as those that we see in certain disorders that we have prenatal diagnosis for. Now, we also know, however, that this is actually not quite unique to women as we get older. It's also quite something we see in the very young, and particularly young teenagers as they become reproductively active and go through something called menarche. So one of the things that this has led to is that we now know that egg donation programs, for example, that we might have to shift the age at which we ask women to donate eggs to the kind of mid-20s, rather than try and get them really young, as we used to think, the younger the better. So some of our findings in exploring basic facets of the biology of aging for women, but also fertility for men, obviously, has then led to direct changes in policies and also for treatment, meaning that women who need egg donation, for example, are less likely to experience a pregnancy loss or infertility, because the vast majority of eggs that have a chromosome error, they will not implant and they will not develop to a live birth.
Is there a commercial side to this, or is it all primarily research?
We primarily have focused in ReproUnion on building up the capacity for research, but we started off in 2010 with patient-centered research. That means we've been doing bench heights to bed and back again, and also got involved with companies or industries such as Ferring to get this kind of triple helix going as well. So we started off first with a patient agreement between Denmark and Sweden here, so that patients across borders could receive treatment in the other country. And that allowed us to facilitate that we could move not just patients but also samples. So some of the girls and women in southern Sweden and the region there close to Copenhagen here, they've received chemotherapy. And prior to that, they had a tiny part of their ovary with their eggs stored and cryopreserved. And that tissue was shipped across to Denmark, or not shipped, but it came across the bridge, and it's stored here in Denmark. So there's a huge level of trust, but also governance that has allowed us to facilitate interpatient movements. We are doing also the same for men. We're also doing the same for sample testing. For example, we sent samples to Sweden as well from Copenhagen because they have specific tests they can run there on proteins or proteomics. And in general, this patient-led and patient-centered focus has allowed us to kind of get further to technologies as well, and hopefully also new companies and new interventions that will help our couples. One company that has come out of it is run by Claus Andersen, who's been looking at generating media with eggs that are immature. So sometimes some women, a rare indication is that when you stimulate them with hormones in IVF clinics, that they've had years of infertility, but you stimulate them and nothing happens in terms of what comes out at the end. So that means that they get lots of eggs out, but these eggs are at the wrong stage of development, they're immature. And that means that if you fertilize them, nothing is going to happen. So for these women, trying to get maturation occurring in a test tube instead, or in a petri dish, where we can increase hormone levels artificially for a short period of time to get them to go through maturation is very, very viable option for them. And that kind of media is now being developed and also commercialized in appropriate health authorities, of course, in order to benefit patients worldwide.
Right. You were at the MVA annual summit yesterday, giving a presentation. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. At the MVA yesterday, celebrating the 25th anniversary of MVA was really a great pleasure and privilege. We got to talk a bit about ReproUnion and the many years of collaborations. We were celebrating a bit more than 10 years, I think. It started in 2010 as a collaboration between two academics, but they were clinician scientists in the field of male infertility, who were quite good friends and liked each other. But one was in Sweden, the other one was in Denmark. And they decided to say, okay, let's start looking at patients, how we can collaborate with patients and also help patients improve treatment and so forth. And that then kind of became bigger with a new initiative and some funding. There was a survey as well by a consultancy that suggested that this whole region here was really ripe for fertility treatment and reproductive medicine. And in 2015, Ferring joined, and we saw the first large investment into starting capacity building, where 24 PhD students in the clinical sciences and basic sciences were funded. And that kind of cohort is now what we're following through for capacity building and skill development in terms of now solving real challenges in the real world, where we individually can't actually solve them, but where we need each other. We need industry to help us. We need both the clinical scientists and basic scientists to work together to kind of make breakthrough in 5 specific challenges that we look at. That includes male fertility. It includes optimizing the treatments, improving the treatment we are currently using in IVF treatments. That could be, for example, stratifying our patients better, who would benefit from which stimulation program, or alternative programs as well for fertility treatment. The third challenge is to look at specifically ovarian aging and reproductive longevity in women. Why is it that when we get a bit older, into our 30s, that we start having a decline in our fertility? Now that we are living even longer, but our kind of reproductive lifespan hasn't really extended the same as our health span or lifespan has. In the fourth challenge, we're looking at comorbidities. So I'm not sure how many people know this, but the sperm quality or semen sample concentration can be a pretty good indication of later morbidities for men, for example. And for women as well, there are also comorbidities that if you, for example, enter menopause very early, that you're then at risk of osteoporosis, but also cardiovascular disease and some other indications that come later. So we're interested in elucidating the factors behind these associations and what is actually cause and effect. Because it means, for example, if we could extend menopause, then we might also be able to delay onset of other more kind of age-related morbidities later on. And then the final challenge we're looking at is raising awareness. There has been several studies there's about 40 in the literature, of which about 2/3 suggest that we tend to overestimate our ability to have children as we age, particularly women. And we really kind of think, oh, it's not a big deal. And then, and then we think, oh, okay, if I have a problem, IVF will solve it all. And obviously, if you've gone into premature early menopause, right, which happens 10 years, your fertility issues up to 10 years prior to actually entering menopause, it can be very tricky then to figure out what to do next. And that's what we're kind of trying to understand and look at, what informs in our reproductive choices later on.
So plenty still to study then.
Yes, absolutely. We're really fascinated by this topic because the intersection with society, how we look differently at reproductive longevity, in general also longevity with aging that we're looking at now, an aging population, declining fertility rates in Britain, in Denmark, in some East Asian countries like Korea and Japan. We are way below replacement. With that comes some challenges for our society with how we run things, the funding of social programs, pensions, and our society as we're looking at a population decline with these lowered fertility rates. So I think that I think lowering fertility rates and a lower global population is not necessarily a bad thing for the global health and what we're seeing with regards to climate change and other man-made issues, but for us as societies it's deeply problematic, and we face some severe challenges with how to actually solve some of these issues.